Hi, I'm Aldo. Welcome to Plays the Thing, the channel where I share my experiences prepping and playing tabletop role playing games. So, this is going to be a continuation of the Gloaming campaign that I've been running with my regular group. We were finally able to get a substantial number of them back together, and so we thought we'd continue that this time out. And let me go ahead and take you to our game page. I know this is always an awkward time of the video here as I try to get my act together and transition to the right page. Wham, there we go. We are on the right page. So this time around, we have our friends Asher, the Warlock, played by my friend Mario. There is Asher. We have Nixie, my friend Dan's character. She's a new character, a level 1 character, an Elven Ranger. Dan had to replace Sir Bernard, who died tragically a couple of sessions ago. Then my friend Jason's character, Renwick, the human wizard. And Lauren's character, Rowena, who is a human witch. And then Ursula, the half-orc fighter played by my friend Mike. And where we left off, we had a few other people with us, but they were unable to make it. So we'll just have them recede into the background and then disappear at a point in the narrative. So first, to give a recap, where we left our characters last. Oh, and I've got to say, look, we have a new map here, right? We were using a modified version of the map that actually came with the Cursed Scrolls #1, which is what we're running. But I did a little Googling and I found Zandalar Fenwick's map that he made using Incarnate I did a Google search for VTT map ShadowDark Gloaming. And this is one of the first links that came up on a Reddit page. And I saw that he was saying that it was fine for folks to use it in their games. And so I downloaded it and I'm using it now as my map for my region map for this campaign. And I love it. I think it does a really good job. It makes everything very clear. I've gone and added a few details. So I've added just about everywhere that our group has been. There is Drusilla's cottage where they fought the hag on the first time out. This is Wardenwood there. And of course, Marin's Hold, which the players have not been to yet. But they know where it is on the map. And then over here, I have this marker here for the bandit camp, where we had left them last. And if you recall, the situation was as follows. The characters a few sessions ago had gone out to find these bandits that had been plaguing Wardenwood. And in doing so, they ran into a little bit more that they can handle. The bandits were being led by Greaves Redthorn, who was a traitor to the Knights of St. Idris, and he was trying to summon a marrow fiend in the middle of the bandit camp. And in that whole situation, Ursula got captured. Sir Bernard, our Knight of St. Idris, was killed. Several of the other characters were almost killed. They escaped by a little luck and a little skill on the part of several of the players. Ursula managed to escape before Greaves summoned the demon. And the last she heard was the demon tearing apart the bandit camp. And then that group basically limped back to Wardenwood. If you recall, the last time we played, the characters had decided that they were going to return to the scene of the summoning for a couple of reasons. One, they wanted to retrieve Sir Bernard's body, and they also wanted to investigate to see if they can figure out some more things. By this point, Renwick had been able to piece together that Unduluk is a demon that comes into the material plane by growing up through infernal vegetation, and that everything that is birthed from those trees, or every aspect of that vegetation that is in the world, is Unduluk, right? Unduluk is legion, right? And so to defeat an aspect of him on the material plane is to maybe deprive him of a body part, but he is still, or it is still Unduluk, right? And he had figured out that the marrow fiend that was summoned, he figured that out based on Ursula's descriptions, was a manifestation of Unduluk, as was the marrow tree that birthed it, right? So he wanted to return to the scene of crime to find out more, or the scene of the summoning to find out more. So they had set off. They'd had an encounter with a unicorn on the way there. They had an encounter with a spider. And then they went to the bandit camp, and they found actually Greaves Redthorn there doing something in a hole in the ground in the house that was the headquarters of the old bandits before they got torn apart by the demon. They were basically sacrificed to Unduluk by Greaves Redthorn. And when they found this hole in the ground and Greaves Redthorn came out of it, there was a brief fight. Greaves was killed in that fight, and then a tentacle grabbed him by the leg and dragged him into this hole in the ground. And the party that's where we left off, right? So the party was left looking at this hole in the ground and thinking like, what are we going to do? So the answer to that was that they did not want to go in there. Obviously, there's some tentacle, and they could hear it crunching and munching and slurping on the body of, they assumed, Greaves Redthorn, and then letting out these kind of chittering, whimpering sounds. I said it sounds pathetic, right? It sounds like inhuman and infernal, but also pathetic. It was obviously consuming Greaves Redthorn. And they didn't want to have any part of that. So what they did is that they started just taking wood, furniture, cutting down pieces of the house, cutting down whatever they could find, throwing it down the hole, stuffing it down the hole as long as they could, throwing oil into the hole. And they asked me, okay, how long would it take for us to get enough stuff into that room? And it's like a 10-foot, it's like a 10-foot tunnel that opened up into like this room. And they could tell by throwing, they actually lit an arrow on fire and threw it in, or launched it in, and they could see that it was a small room in there, or a small cavern in there with roots and stuff like that. So they tried to stuff as much stuff as they could down there, and they wanted to light it on fire and hopefully kill whatever was in there through fire. So they asked me, how long would it take for us to be able to get enough stuff in there to make that happen? And I said, well, it's actually a lot of work to chop everything down and push it all in, and and I said, okay, so I think that for every hour that you spend doing that, you're going to have a 1 in 6 chance of being able to destroy whatever's in there. However, I also reminded Renwick, I didn't have him make a roll for this, it's just something he would have known, that the marrow fiend that was summoned is Unduluk, and this thing that is in there is Unduluk too. So I said, Unduluk knows you're here, which means that marrow fiend, which Ursula caught a glimpse of and is terrible, is out there in the world somewhere. Now it had been running around for about a week, so it wasn't immediately here, right? When they arrived, there was actually a chance that it would be here. I rolled randomly to see if it would be here, and it was not. I also rolled randomly to see if Greaves was here, and he was, right? So, but it was out there in the world, and it knew that they were here, so it would be coming, right? Presumably, it would be coming, or could be coming. So I'm like, how many hours are you going to spend stuffing things down there? Like I said, there's a 1 in 6 chance that you'll destroy whatever's in there for every hour that you spend. And so they knew that on my end, I was doing another calculus. Like I was going to basically roll to see if that marrow fiend showed up, if Unduluk showed up in that aspect. So this is the formula I had in my head. I was going to roll a random encounter check for the time that they spent here. and it's a D8, right? And it on a 1, Unduluk will arrive while they're here. And I was going to add +1 per hour that they spent doing this, right? So they decided, Renwick said, I'm happy with a 50-50 chance. I didn't tell them what the formula was. He just said, I'm happy with a 50-50 chance. So 3 in 6 chance that whatever's in there would be destroyed. Ursula asked if she could use her rangering skills to maybe make that more effective. I said I wasn't sure about that, but I said, yeah, let's go ahead and let you roll. Rolled really poorly, even with advantage, so that didn't happen. So they had a 3 in 6 chance. So we rolled the die, and they rolled a 4, right? And then I rolled to see if Unduluk would show up, which would be 1 base chance plus 3 for the 3 hours. That's 4 or less on a D8, and I rolled a 5 on the D8. So they left before Unduluk could arrive. And then it was basically at that point kind of a hex crawl back, and I'm moving the token now and the path that they took. A hex crawl back to Wardenwood. And they got lucky. I didn't make any successful rolls for any wandering monsters or anything like that on the way back. So they got to Wardenwood. And there we decided to do a little downtime activity, right? And again, for this campaign, we're reflavoring the carousing rolls, right? This was not like a rousing, party or anything like that for the most part. There's a little bit of an exception. What we said is, all right, they had some gold that they got from some treasure that they found at the site. Ursula had been able to find actually her old gear. So she got that back. They had found a few little gems here and there that the bandits had squirreled away. That was enough for a few experience points and stuff like that. They cashed that stuff in, and then they used it to throw Sir Bernard a funeral, like a worthy funeral, right? And so we rolled the downtime activities and got various things. There was a funeral that was the expense for. Then there was kind of like a gathering afterwards to remember him. And then there were some celebrations and whatnot. We found out that there was a bard that was hanging around because the bard showed up in several of the results on the carousing. The players decided they wanted to name him McYager, and McYager looks exactly like current day Mick Jagger, but dressed in medieval garb, right? So he's a bard that was coming through town, and he was at the festivities. He made friends with Rowena, who sang a song about Sir Bernard that she composed, and he gave her some pointers and some and some thumbs up on her performance. Oh yeah, Asher decided that he was going to. There was a ceremony that he had to perform for Shun the Vile that involved throwing a 1970-esque kind of swingers party in town. So there was that going on in his in whatever abode he rented out for that to be happening. And McYager showed up there too, according to the results on the roll. So he was making his rounds. And we ended up rolling for some rumors, actually. And McYager told a couple of stories. He told a story of a weird occurrence that had happened at Marin's Hold, where he was there recently, where a fisherman was had told a story of like pulling up a giant fish with 2 arms and 2 legs that pulled the hook out of its mouth and jumped back into the lake. That was a rumor that comes from the supplement that we're using, and it's a reference to something that's happening in Bittermold Keep. And I think there was another rumor that was mentioned, and for the love of God right now, I can't remember what it was. Let me see. Oh, yes. McYeager also warned Rowena, said, like, I like you, he said, and, like, but you have to be careful. You're lucky that you're in Wardenwood, because in Marin's Hold, they've just accused 3 women of witchcraft and burned them, hung them and burned them. It's bad times over there. Apparently, they had a demon attack that now people are worried was facilitated with inside help, and so they're kind of accusing anybody they suspect of being a witch and executing them. The Reeve was doing this. So anyway, he passed along that information, and then he left. And so we everybody got experience points. It was nice to see Nixie coming up close to first level. The other characters are still about halfway, maybe a little bit. By the end of this adventure, they were a little bit more than halfway to third level, but they still had a ways to go. And by the time this carousing was over, so that was that. And then I basically asked them what their plan was going to be. So we kind of gathered everybody again together, and they had an in-character conversation. And there were a couple of ideas floating around. There was some idea that maybe they should go once more to the bandit camp, because Renwick was worried that they had not accomplished their deed. He wanted to get visual confirmation that they had done what they wanted to do. The other thing is that Renwick had come up with some new ideas. He had been poring through some of the tomes he had brought from the north and looking for references for things. He was looking for like ways of fighting these demons, killing these creatures more effectively. And he couldn't find anything except that there was mention of an old order of green knights that had been in this region fighting demonic presences. And I'm like, you don't know of anything specific, but it is probable that somewhere around here there are the remnants of that order. You're not sure how to find that, but that might be the case. He rolled a 12, I think it was, on his intelligence roll. So that's as good as he was able to get. So the other idea that he threw out there, in addition to maybe going back to the bandit camp one more time, was to maybe go to Marin's Hold, because Marin's Hold was a bigger settlement, possibly an older settlement. And so he was hoping that maybe they would have a little bit more lore about these Green Knights, maybe be able to connect them in some way. And in the balance, I think the party liked that idea better than the idea of going back to the bandit camp. So that's what they decided to do. So we were back to hex crawling. I laughed because in the very first hex, I rolled a random encounter check. I'm like, oh geez, what's this gonna be? And we ended up rolling a moose. It was just eating on the side, like close to the road. And as the characters were going by, I rolled to see what its reaction would be. And it was kind of like a simultaneous thing. I was rolling a reaction as I had paused. I had announced that it was there. They said they were going to give it wide berth. I'm like, okay, they didn't say anything else. I'm just going to roll reaction. And as I was rolling, Lauren's like, I think I'm going to use my Woodborne kind of activity to kind of, background to kind of like, vibe with it, right? So I rolled hostile as she was saying that. So I'm like, okay, maybe I didn't wait long enough for them to initiate some sort of action. So I said, okay, it's pawing at the ground, right? And it lowers its antlers towards you guys. And it looks like it's going to, attack you guys. But I said, since you were saying what you said right at the moment as a rolling, I said, give me another roll. And that'll be enough to maybe shift its, if you roll well enough, it'll shift its attitude up one level, maybe, or maybe it'll just stay hostile. So she rolled well enough to bump it up to curious. And then she did something else that ended up by the end of this kind of backing, because whenever they go to curious or suspicious, I went from hostile to suspicious. And then whenever they're in that, either suspicious or curious mode, I kind of allow further interactions to take it up or take it down, right? Usually, if they get to kind of neutral, I'll have the creature just like kind of like ignore them and amble off or whatever. But we role play it from there. And the thing ended up by the end of it all friendly. So then for the rest of the time that they were traveling, they had this moose following them, and Rowena was like feeding it berries and stuff like that, and it was following along. And then they settled down for camp at their usual campsite, about right about there. And it hung around until Rowena, who was at first watch, went to sleep. And then when Asher came in and just looked at the moose and was like, I wonder if I've ever eaten moose before. The moose just kind of looked at Asher, and then it just left. It just ambled off. So, that was good. No nasty combat encounter or anything like that. The second day, they continued down the path, and they didn't have any encounters. They didn't have any nighttime encounters either. And when they woke up in the morning, Renwick couldn't help himself. He was like, we are so close to that bandit camp. Maybe we should go. And they had another in-character conversation, and they all decided, yeah, we should go. Just to see. So I rolled a wandering encounter roll as they went to the camp, and I rolled, and I got a demon. I got a demon encounter. And I was like, oh boy. Okay, this could be bad, because it's always possible that I will roll a Marrow Fiend. And we know which Marrow Fiend that would be. So I was curious. Obviously, I love finding out what the dice tell me. I rolled, and I got an Ichor Ooze instead. And I'm like, okay, so what would the Ichor Ooze be doing here? And this is what I love about kind of setting up a situation where you have, running a game. I don't have a pre-written script for any of this, but I have a good sense of what the situation is, what all the players and factions are doing. And I'd already told Renwick that he was able to figure out that there had been a thinning of the barriers between dimensions here, and that you had these kind of like different infernal planes that were coming together, different demon princes, whose realms were kind of like superimposing on here. And I had mentioned, like, they don't all get along, right? There is some measure of rivalry between these demon princes. So I'm like, okay, Ichor Oozes, that's going to be Mugdalblub's, servitor, essentially, right? And it's like, there are, one of the things that the players didn't know at this point is that what Grease Redthorn had been doing in that little cavern was harvesting these kind of fruit, these seeds that he was going to plant elsewhere to grow more Marrow Fiends, to bring more of Unduluk into this plane. And the fire had not destroyed them. So when I rolled an Ichor Ooze for this random encounter roll, I'm like, okay, well, what this is that Mugdalblub has sent a servitor here to destroy those seedlings before anybody could plant them somewhere and grow them. So it's a random encounter with a purpose, with a fitting into the broader context of what's going on. So the characters went in, and one of the things that they had asked me actually about at the beginning of the session was, oh my gosh, the sword that we brought back for the hag that we had given to Wardenwood that was over the hearth, that was never found when we made our escape and all of that. It was never found here. And so they wanted to search. They had searched the cache, when they were getting like wood and oil and stuff like that, but it wasn't there. So they kind of spread out into the bandit camp, and they started searching different huts and stuff to see if they could find the sword there. So it was Renwick and Nixie went to the main house to see what was left there, and the other three went to search for the sword and anything else they might find in the other huts. So they didn't find the sword, but when Renwick and Nixie went to the house, they they found like the root cellar mostly exposed, and they busted out some of like the charred remains of the floor that were there to make it even more visible. And they could see into the hole of the root cellar, and they could see the hole that led to that cavern where Greaves Redthorn had been hanging out, right, and trying to harvest that stuff. And they couldn't. It was too dark, right? So they were trying to figure out how to get down there without getting into trouble or anything like that. And right when they were about to determine that they were going to go down there, Renwick whistled to call the others over. And at that point, the Ichor ooze, which had already been down that hole and had already kind of like absorbed the seedlings, the Ichor ooze, I decided, because I rolled like how far away it was, and it was near. So I decided that it was already kind of ash covered and clinging to the side of the pit of the root cellar, right? So he was just under Renwick. And when Renwick whistled and he figured out, like, reinforcements are coming, the Ichor ooze came up to attack. I had them roll a wisdom check to see if they'd be surprised, and neither Nixie nor Renwick was surprised. So it came up and they kind of jumped back. We rolled initiative. Renwick won. He launched a magic missile at the thing, hit it, blasted chunks of ash off its side. But then it was its go. It came up with pseudopods and it missed both of them. And then Nixie shot an arrow and it thumped into its side and it hit it, but didn't penetrate as much as she would have hoped, given the force with which she let the arrow go. So that thing was coming out, menacing them. In the meantime, the others came running from the other locations. Ursula in the lead, like just, running to back up her teammates, and the others just behind her. Basically there was another round where it was just Renwick and Nixie. Nixie got, there was another magic missile that went off and hit the creature as well, but then it was its go again, and it hit Renwick, grabbed him with the tentacle, and damaged it. Damaged Renwick, right? Badly enough that Renwick went down. It did 6 points of damage, so it kind of like wrapped around his neck and arm, and it burned, and he gave this kind of like, he said, I'll give a Tom Baker kind of like, from the old Doctor Who episode, as he kind of collapsed unconscious on the ground. And by this point, Asher had come running up close, because of the initiative order, he had surpassed Ursula. He came running up and he saw the Ichor ooze, and rather than attack it, which he could have this round, he just kind of like backed up. He was like, ugh. He backed up. And unfortunately for him, the Ichor ooze can attack at near distance with those pseudopods. So it launched one pseudopod at Renwick and took him down, launched the other pseudopod at Asher and did some damage to him, but didn't kill him. And then Ursula came up, and I think there was another, Nixie put another arrow in this thing, and then Ursula came up and just with one blow cleaved this thing in half, and it poured out its contents onto the ground, and these embryonic kind of versions of marrow fiends kind of like came out, right? They would have been the seeds that would have grown a marrow tree, and then would have birthed these things like the other one, but they kind of came out, these kind of seedlings, and they went and finished those things off. But that's what the Ichor ooze had been doing, right? It's like trying to destroy that. So Nixie came over and tried to do a salve on Renwick, which didn't work, but Rowena came in and did essentially a first aid and was able to stabilize him. And then Renwick came kind of back up, and then they decided they would camp near here. They left this area, and they decided they would camp near here. And that's, they passed the night, thankfully, uneventfully. So that's what had happened there. The next day, they proceeded towards Marin's Hold. On the way there, they had another encounter with that unicorn that they encountered a few sessions back, and it went much the same. This time it was in broad daylight. they were walking down the path and they looked up, and the unicorn was kind of on elevated ground right about where I just placed the token. Let me get these tokens off the, I don't even know why I put them there. Let me put them back off to the side. But if you see where the kind of hooded token that marks the party is, to the north of the road, right around here, they saw the unicorn grazing on elevated ground up in the forest, just like before it looked at them. And when Rowena kind of like Disney princessed her hand out towards it, it turned and just gracefully leaped back into the forest out of sight. And then they got to Marin's Hold the next day without any further ado. Now, the people at Marin's Hold were very. It's obvious that there's kind of like a bad feeling in the town. The guards were suspicious. The characters just said, look, we're just here to rest. We've had a long trip from Wardenwood. They try to drop Craith's name. If you remember, Craith, who's one of their company, often travels between Wardenwood and Marin's Hold. So he wasn't with them this time because Andrew couldn't play. But they kind of dropped his name to see if that would buy them a little bit of credit here. But the guards were a little bit surly. They did say, like, yeah, sure, you can go to the Crayfish Tavern or something like that, and they'll feed you and they'll give you a room. But it was obvious that they were suspicious, maybe of Renwick and of Rowena, and one of their number left while they were walking to the tavern, and it was obvious he was going to go do something furtive. So Nixie decided to kind of like sneak and cut him off and follow him to see where he would go. The rest of the party went to the tavern, and it was like this wooden building that had another like level added to it that was bigger than the level on the bottom, right? So it was like, kind of supported by timbers and stuff like that, but it was just like kind of like a poor construction. Like Jason joked, there's a sign that says no architect was involved in the building of this structure on the side, right? So they went in, and I described a kind of like a nasty wharf bar, like just like people that were there were not too many fishermen here because they were all out for the day, but there were a few people here nursing drinks and looking kind of bitter and depressed, and there was kind of like the innkeep was not the friendliest guy, and there was an old man that was blind sitting in a corner just kind of like talking to himself and stuff like that. And so the characters kind of settled in. They got a room. They decided that they felt very unsafe, so they all decided to get one room. And after spending some time down here to get rumors, they were just going to go up and take their supper in the room and just wait there until they could move on the next day, right? But they did want to try to get some information. So Rowena asked about what had been happening here, and the bartender shared that several Skrells, which are these kind of raptor-like demons that are very, very clever, had breached the gates or breached the walls and done some serious damage. And although they'd managed to fend them off, like some children were abducted by the Skrells, and then he kind of reiterated or confirmed what McYager had told them, that the Reeve had dealt with the issue by killing supposedly some witches, some supposed witches, a little bit north of here. They took them to the Boot Hill and disposed of them up there. So they got that information, and then I let Renwick said he was good just to be hanging around here drinking and listening to stories that were being told. And I said, okay, why don't you give me a wisdom check, and if you roll, I'll give you one rumor for a 12, 2 rumors for a 15, and 3 rumors for anything else above 18. He rolled like a 19, so he got 3 rumors, and the rumors that he got were this. The old man was, again, kind of talking to himself, gibbering to himself, and sometimes like saying these non sequiturs to people, or chiming in other people's stories, or just like whatever. And in one of those moments, he started like yelling about the Lord of Time grants boons for offering his slain enemies. And he didn't say it just like that. He I kind of embellished it a little bit and stuff, but he's like, and he suggested that, like, why do you think I've been around for so long, right? Something like maybe he had gotten one of the boons from the Lord of Time and whatever. So, so he said that, and Renwick is like, I'm going to file that on possibly crazy, maybe useful, right? Then the other thing that he heard were two. These all came later in the day when some fishermen had come back from the day, and they were just telling stories, and they were talking about, like, there was a trapper, because I said, given the problems down here, hunting hasn't been that good around Marin's Hold. So there was a trapper who had asked if the fishermen could drop him off in the wood north of the lake, and then pick him up later, see if he had better luck hunting there. And this trapper had said that Bittermold Keep, he had found the remnants of Bittermold Keep up there, which was slowly melting like wax. And he also said that he saw some, let me see, where was it? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong table. He also heard that, in addition to that this woodsman had spotted several short-cloaked figures scurrying into that keep. Those are rumors that come from the second rumor table in the Cursed Scroll number 1. So I thought this was interesting because, again, none of this is planned. I don't know how all these different pieces are going to interlock, right? But Renwick made the assumption, because he had just learned about the Green Knights, and he's looking for remnants of the Green Knight, right? He's looking for that. And here he hears of a keep that's in the wood. He's like, well, it could be a Green Knight, an old Green Knight stronghold. So I think we should go there where this trapper went. So he talked with the rest of the party, and the rest of the party was like, yeah, okay, that sounds like a lead. Let's try to take that up. And so where we left the session is that they approached those fishermen and asked if they could take them there where they had taken the trapper. And the fishermen said, yeah, if you've got the coin, we've got the time to take you. So they paid up, and where we pick up next session is that they're going to be going over there to explore Bittermold Keep. And I'm excited about that. It feels like we are launching into a completely new facet of this campaign. It's funny because Bittermold Keep is the most detailed thing in the setting. It is the adventure that is laid out for game masters to run. And this is session 7, and we've only just learned about Bittermold Keep, and there's a really organic reason as to why they are going there. They're looking for something very specific, right? And it's been nice getting there. And it's interesting because Bittermold Keep is an important and detailed location. I'm not sure that it's going to be the most important location in the game, right? They're looking for something. Maybe they'll find it there. Maybe they'll find other things there. But this not knowing where it's going is just a lot of fun. And it's for OSR folk, right, who've been used to playing this kind of, what might be called a sandbox. I know there's sometimes that term is used in ways that are imprecise, but the idea that it's kind of an open world, and that you come in with preparation, but you don't necessarily come in with a story that you've scripted, encounters that you're scripting. You're letting that unfold. And it just makes it so much more fun to see it unfold. For me as a game master, it makes it so much more fun to be surprised by what emerges, right? And this is a style of play. I mean, I've been playing role-playing games since 1981, so you can do the math on that. But I've only been experimenting intentionally with this type of gaming, this mode of play, for the past 10 years or so. And I would say that I've only really become skilled at running this kind of game in the last 5 years or so, right? I mean, I'm by no means an expert yet. I don't think I ever will be, right? I think this is a type of craft where you can always keep growing and learning. And I do every time I run, and every time I hear folks comment on how I run, I take something new away. But it's just, and it's that's to say, in the 30 years that came before trying to do this very intentionally, I would do this kind of stuff accidentally. And it's funny because those are always the moments where, like, I'm sure we've all had, as gamers, had these moments like, wow, for some reason, like, the games that seem the most successful are the ones that we didn't have time to plan for, right? Like, wow, I spent all this time prepping this story, and man, it was a little bit, it was fine, but it was like, ugh. And then we did this one shot, maybe in a different game or maybe in the same campaign, but we didn't have anything prepped and we just sat down to go. And so you're slipping into these kinds of modes, which are seen as, so this type of play did happen before, but not intentionally. And it's just been really nice to make it the default, and that doesn't mean that every one of them is awesome, right? Sometimes you have better nights than others, like always, but by and large, this feels more fun to me as game master, and I'm so glad that I'm gaming that way. All right, so that is the Gloaming, the most recent installment. Thank you for sticking around to the end. As always, I wish you good health, I wish you good cheer, and I wish you good gaming. Goodbye.